Hi all, I'm Chris. I run the York School of Defence and the Art That Adorns event that we host every year at Easter. Unfortunately, COVID-19 stopped play or suspended play. We will be back. We will reschedule later in the year. However, some of our instructors have been wonderfully kind and they've put together a series of small videos for you guys to take a look at home, work through, listen to, play through, fence along with, exercise along with, and all sorts of different exciting things. So the first video I'd like to present is by Lauren Stokeld. She is one of the scholars at the York School of Defence and she's presenting an interesting little lecture called A Translation Tea Party, and she has kindly prepared a little teaser trailer for you.
Hi everyone, I'm Lauren. I'm one of your instructors from the Art That Adorns You 2020, and I'm going to be running the Translation Tea Party. Now I realise that among such an amazing array of historical violence, the lecture on translation can be a bit of a hard sell. So Chris has let me make this little taster video to try and tempt you all over to the dark side. So realistically, I can start by asking you three questions. Do you like swords? Do you like hot drinks? Do you like thinking about medieval German? And if you can answer yes to even just two of those questions, then we're going to get along fine. But I'm also going to try and just take you through some reasons why I think this lecture will be really fun, but also really useful. So I've got some high-tech signage. I've got about 5 minutes, and I'm going to try and convince you to come to the Translation Tea Party. So first of all, we're going to be thinking about Locutioner's text and language. The reason I'm thinking of working with Locutioner is because a lot of us train Locutioner. He's got really important treaties, and he's who we train at the York School of Defence. But don't worry, I'm not going to be training you on the techniques. Any of you who have seen me hit myself in the face with a sword will know that's a bad idea. But I'm going to be taking you through the text and the language itself. My background is in historical linguistics, and I work particularly with Germanic languages. So I'm really interested in how he's writing and the language he's writing in, which is early New High German, which was written between about 1350 and 1650, and he's writing in the 15th century. So right bang smack in the middle of it. And he's also writing in a Bavarian dialect. So a little fun factoid for you. The technique Bogen, which means the bowing, would normally be spelt with a B, Bogen, but it's a really Bavarian thing to mix up P's and B's, and they even do it in the modern dialect now. So there's lots of fun little language facts like that. But we're also going to think about the fact that realistically, most of us work from a modern English translation. We don't have time to necessarily go and learn the language and then translate the whole thing ourselves. But obviously that creates all sorts of other problems for us. And we need to think about the impact of translation. So this is a lot about what my lecture is going to be about, is thinking about what it means to be translating from one language to another. And I get really word nerdy about this, and I understand not everyone does, but we're going to see the ways in which translation problems can be really impactful on how we interpret these sword fighting techniques. And the reality is that there's no such thing as a perfect translation. All translation is interpretation. Every translator is having to make decisions, and they don't always tell you where they're making the decisions. So there's something that we think about, which is translation loss. So sometimes you can lose a layer of meaning, sometimes you can lose the style or the overall feel of a text, or sometimes I've seen translators just get rid of entire sentences, which can be quite frustrating. But the most typical problem that we're going to come across is the fact that it's very hard to turn one word into another easily. And a really good example of this, word factoid, is with the word versetzen, which turns up a lot in Locutioner's manuscript. And realistically, there are several ways you could translate this. The most common and obvious versions we could find would be to displace or to parry. Realistically, there's no reason why versetzen couldn't be translated as either of these words, if you look at it as a word. But the point is that as martial artists, there's a difference between a displacement and a parry, and suddenly it becomes really important to know which versetzen is meaning, and it's just almost impossible to tell. But realistically, a translator is going to make a decision one way or another. So the Wichtenauer translation tends to favour displace, and the forthcoming translation tends to favour parry. And that's going to change how we then do the technique. So suddenly thinking about the sorts of decisions a translator makes and when they're telling us about it is really, really important. But we aren't just having to worry about translating the medieval German into modern English. There are all sorts of layers of translation going on with this. So I've made you all a little fun diagram. So if we think about Locutioner with his movement, the original techniques, when he came to writing his manuscript, he suddenly had to try and turn these 3D movements into 1D words, essentially one line of words and some pictures. So there's a form of translation where he was having to come up with conventions and rules and ways to try and represent complicated movements in a way he could put on a page. Then somebody comes along and turns the early New High German into English with all the problems we've just discussed. And then we have to go and translate the English back into movements. And again, we've got our own biases, our own decisions we're going to be making. So there's 3 layers of translation going through this, 3 times that we can be having translation loss. And we're going to have a good think about how we can learn about this, where else we can see movement being translated into words and back again, and how we can learn to try and combat some of the problems that we're finding, and really just to reconcile with ourselves that we're not really going to be able to create exactly what Locutioner was doing because of all these layers of translation that are going on. But obviously, it would be really dull if I just talk at you the whole time. So we're going to do some activities in the lecture. It's going to be interactive. I'm going to have you up and dancing. We're going to do some translation together. We're going to have really good fun with this. And we're really going to see in action how much translation can impact the way in which we deal with medieval source material, and really the way in which HEMA is translation all the way through. So I hope you're going to find it fun. I hope you're going to come off as language nerdy as I am. Okay, maybe that's a bit of a wild hope. But certainly I think you're going to find it useful, and I'm going to be hopefully able to give you some really good tools for dealing with medieval sources. And if not, worst comes to the worst, have a cup of tea, lie on a blanket, eat a biscuit, have a snooze. It's going to be great. So all I can really say now is happy Easter, drink tea, eat chocolate, stay safe. I have gone over my time limit, so I will sign off, and hopefully I will see you all soon.